Hello, everyone. Welcome to the lecture series of UNESCO. I am honored to be here today presenting on behalf of UNESCO to introduce you to pedigree analysis and modes of inheritance topic. So let's begin. Genetics started with Gregor Mendel, who discovered that traits are inherited through genes. These genes come in different versions called allele. Some allele are dominant, meaning they overshadow recessive allele. If a person inherits the same allele from both parents, like this one, big Y, or small y, they are known as the homozygous. And if they inherit different copies like this one, big Y, small y, they are heterozygous. So understanding the concept help us to trace these inherited traits. Some traits follow Mendelian inheritance patterns, such as our eye color, blood type, and certain genetic disorder. For example, here, free earlobes is dominant to the attached earlobes, and then cheek dimple is found to be dominant to no cheek dimples, and no Hishikers thumb is dominant to the Hishikers thumb. So by studying this trait across generation, we can determine their mode of inheritance and assess the risk of passing them on. These are the example of our appearance of or traits that shaped by the allele versions. And here is other human traits that we can follow the inheritance in the family by using this family traits of worksheet. Write down here your family members, including you, and then the traits are here. And then observe the trait in your family and jot down here. Then we can have something like this. This is the simple and common pedigree analysis. It shows here from the first generation, grandparents, second generation, from the parents, aunts and uncles, and then the children's here, which is third generation for earlobe attachments. And then to track the genetic inheritance, we use this pedigree analysis, something like this, which is a tool that shows how traits or diseases appear in a family trees. Because in this pedigree analysis, it shows the relationship among the family members. So this will help doctors and genetic counselors predict risk for future generations and identify carriers of inherited condition. Like this, for example, cleft chin and chin without a cleft. So we can help to determine the patterns of inheritance of the cleft chin in the family. So therefore, scientists has created symbols that recognize globally to make it the pedigree analysis simpler and easy to follow. For instance, here, circle shape represent for a female and square for a male. Shaded mean affected with a certain disease and unshaded, unaffected individual. The top here is the first generation, and then followed by here the middle as second generation, and the last here is the third generation. Connection line here means that these two person mating or married, and here is symbol for dizygotic, and here is the monozygotic twin. Crossing line on the shape here represent the symbol of di, either the individual affected by the disease or unaffected. So by analyzing a pedigree, we can determine genotype, identify the phenotype, and predict how the trait will be passed on in the future. The information from the pedigree make it possible to determine how certain allele are inherited, whether they are dominant, recessive, autosomal, or sex-linked. Let's explore. So pattern of inheritance, we have two types, which is autosomal inheritance, where the traits are carried on non-sex chromosome, chromosome number 1 to chromosome 22. Under this inheritance, they are autosomal dominant inheritance when only one copy of the mutated gene from one parent is needed to express the trait. And then the other type, which is autosomal recessive inheritance, where the both copies of the gene from one from each parent must be mutated for the trait to be expressed. Another type of the mode of the inheritance, which is X-linked inheritance, where the traits are carried on the X chromosome and can be recessive or dominant as well. And then, however, affecting males and females differently due to the sex chromosome inheritance patterns. So let's see the example of the autosomal dominant inheritance, okay? So this is the pedigree family for this type of the inheritance when an individual only has to have one copy of the allele in order to exhibit this trait. And then if one of the parent has it, then on average 50% of the children will show the trait. And if an individual has the trait, then at least one of the parent has the trait. Both male and female are affected equally and should be capable of transmitting the trait. And there's no skipping of the generation. Example of the disease for this type of the inheritance, which is Huntington disease and neurofibromatosis 1. And then move to the autosomal recessive inheritance. So an individual need both recessive allele to express the traits. And then heterozygous are considered when they are only carry one mutated gene here and here, to be considered as the carrier only. And then both male and female should be affected equally and should be capable of transmitting the traits. Example of this disease for this type of inheritance, which is cystic fibrosis, sickle cell anemia, and Tay-Sachs disease. Let's move to the X-linked inheritance, where the affecting traits carried on the X chromosome showcases how male and female are affected differently. And it also can be dominant and or recessive as well, as I mentioned earlier. So this one, for example, affected father, affected daughter, and then this one unaffected, where the allele on the chromosome X, sex chromosome. Okay, so both male and female will express the trait if they possess at least one copy of the allele. Affected father got one allele only, affected daughter got one allele only, affected son got one only. Example for this X-linked dominant inheritance, which is incontinentia pigmenti. This one. Okay, let's move to the X-linked recessive inheritance. So for this one, males are more frequently affected because they have only one X chromosome. Okay, and then they will pass the allele down to all their daughters, but not to the son. And then for female, they need two copies of the allele to express the trait. If they only have one of the mutated allele, so means that they are carrier. Example for this inheritance, which is red-green color blindness and hemophilia A. So to summarize, by knowing the definition of pedigree will help us to understand the genetic inheritance, identify the risk, and take preventive healthcare measures. And then we know by using standardized symbol, we can see that the mode of inheritance pattern. And then by knowing this family history, we can make better decision for ourselves and future generation. Thank you for your time, and I hope this session has given you valuable insight into genetics.